You have to put some money away. People have asked me, how much should a small business owner put away on a regular basis? My answer is so much that it's a little painful. If you're not putting money aside at a slightly painful, you look at that money and say, I'd rather go on vacation. Okay? Don't go on vacation every year. Go every other year. Put enough money away. Why is that? Because business runs in cycles. Have you guys ever heard of the notion that we have had 47 recessions since 1790? 47 recessions. Do the math. Comes out to roughly 5 years. Every 5 years, roughly, there is a recession. And by the way, this great recession that we talk about of 2008, if I put it on a list of my 47, it is number 30 in terms of impact on the economy. So what does that tell you? What does that one simple fact tell you? If we're in a recession right now, it will have an end. We'll be coming out of it. Okay, now I'm a futurist. I am also a futurist. I guarantee you that 5 to 7 years later, there'll be another recession. You know, why did we have this last recession? Because people were allowed to buy things they really couldn't afford on the assumption they're going to be able to sell them enough to cover the cost plus the profit. Okay. In 1903, there was a thing called a rich man's panic in the United States of America. It was the first truly crushing economic disaster in our country. You know why it occurred? Because people were allowed to buy things they really couldn't afford on the assumption that they were going to sell them for enough to cover the original cost plus the profit. The Great Depression of 1929, when people could buy stock with only 10% down, people were encouraged to buy things they really couldn't afford, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The American economy keeps running in cycles. We run ourselves up, we get very excited, we run away with ourselves. Americans are collective congenital amnesiacs. We forget everything instantly. Okay? So you will see the ups and downs. So when you're talking about being future focused, recognize that if we're now in a terrible situation, it's going to get fixed. And if we're now in a terrific situation, it will get fixed. There's always somebody looking to make things worse. Okay? So you have to have sufficient cash flow. You also need two kinds of plans. You need a short-term plan and you need a long-term plan. The long-term plan is frequently referred to as my strategic plan. How many of you have strategic plans, long-term plans? How many of you know that the strategic plan should still be exactly the way it was when you first wrote it roughly 20 years from now? Okay? If it isn't good 20 years from now, it ain't a strategic plan. Okay? It's an operational plan. So you also need good operational plans year to year and tweak them. The United States Constitution is a perfect example of a strategic plan. If you really study it, it's the model, you know. If you say to me, how do I learn how to write strategic plans? My answer is read the Constitution. It starts off with a very clear statement of purpose. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then it goes on to spell who is going to do what. So the president, by the way, the American Constitution is by nature a divisive document. The government that we have is intentionally messed up because the guys who wrote this document just came off of George III. They never wanted to have that problem again. So they actually wrote a constitution that makes it necessary for everybody to be obstreperous and difficult for everybody else. Obstructionism is built into our model. Okay? But watch the Constitution, see how it works, then do your strategic plan. Constitution hasn't needed much changing in a long time. Probably won't, in my estimation, for a very long time, because it's basic and fundamental. That's what your strategic plan should look for. The next thing you should have as a small business owner, how many of you have a mission? Vision, values. If I were to take one of you, drag you up on a stage and say, tell me the exact language of your mission, your vision, and your values, who would feel really comfortable coming up on a stage?
I will.
You would? Okay. That's one out of a few. Okay. And even major corporations, when you ask them, the CEO, you say, so you got a mission? Yeah. What's your mission? Can I get back to you on that? So how good is the mission? How good is the vision? How good is the values if it doesn't really tell you what to do? I'm a great believer in the idea of a COP for every business. COP. Central Operating Premise. Mission tells you what you want to be, where you want to go, you know, kumbaya, we're going to be the best of everybody. A central operating premise tells you what to do every day. A central operating premise is brief. It's brief. It's very short. And the Coca-Cola Company, since 1946, has been running on the same central operating premise. Now, if I were to ask you what is the central operating premise of the Coca-Cola Company, what would you say? Taste, joy, no. The central operating premise of the Coca-Cola Company since 1946 has been a very clear statement of what the company is about. It goes like this: put a Coke within an arm's length of everyone on the planet. That's not what you thought it was. What business is Coca-Cola in? Distribution, distribution, distribution. Okay. It succeeds because nobody ever takes their eye off that ball. So they may have new Coke, but what the heck does it matter? We can distribute it, even if it's bad. So for your own business, you need some statement that says what you're really about, but more importantly, tells you what to do. That's why it's called a central operating premise. So when somebody comes to you and says, should I do this? You say, have you read the cop? It's only a sentence. And if they say no, then you say, go read it. And if it doesn't move the central operating premise forward, then don't do it. That's the value of a central operating premise. Brevity is important. There was a letter years ago written by either George Bernard Shaw or Mark Twain, one of those guys, very many pages. And in the last paragraph, the author said to the reader, I apologize for the length of this missive, but I am of insufficient grasp of the material to be brief. If you want a vision, if you want a sense of the future, if you want to know where you're going, you gotta be brief. If you don't understand it well enough, go back. If it's more than a sentence, you're doing it wrong. Okay? You have to really understand. That's what a central operating premise is. Okay? So you need this wonderful concept of a short-term plan, which gets you through reactively. Okay? A long-term plan is not reactive. A long-term plan tells you who you are, how you're set up, what you're going to do, and you can refer to it every so often, but you do not change the strategic plan. I mean, there are consultants like me who love to do new strategic plans, but the truth is you should have a plan that works for a long time.